And of course, the working class and the underclass, they follow the behavior and example, unfortunately, of the middle class. And the black middle class has no agenda for black liberation. Their agenda is to copy white people, to imitate white people, and to be accepted by white people. You know, it's like if you're looking for a wife, if you're dealing with a woman who's okay with a white image of Christ, that definitely cannot be the wife for you, the husband for you. Anybody comfortable with their enemy standing in and substituting for their deity is completely comfortable with white supremacy.
And Dr. Umar Johnson, go ahead and introduce yourself, please, and state what field you're in for us, please.
Yes, indeed. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. Dr. Umar Ifatunde, school psychologist, doctor of clinical psychology, author, Garveyite, Pan-Africanist, and founder of the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Pan-African Academy for Excellence. We just completed all the renovations on the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey School. So we are waiting on 2 final inspections, and we're going to paint the school, and hopefully we'll be having our community grand opening before the end of the calendar year, probably Kwanzaa week. So I'm very excited about that, and I'll be sharing more about the school at the Agricultural Fairgrounds during the Ethiopian World Federation's annual celebration. Looking forward to coming back to St. Croix. I believe I was there 2 years ago.
Yes, sir.
EWF celebration as well, 2021. So it's been 2 years. I just came from St. Thomas last month, had a great time there, and I'm looking forward to returning to St. Croix. So we're going to talk a little bit about everything at the Agricultural Fairgrounds Saturday at 3 o'clock. We're going to deal with, obviously, the
Okay, my
miseducation.
brother. You mentioned in opening this school, right? Explain children ourselves.
Repeat that question, Honorable.
Yes, you just mentioned opening this school in Delaware, right? That's where it is.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Wilmington, Delaware.
explain to the listening audience the importance of us educating our children. And us, I mean African people.
Yes, indeed. Well, I think most of us are somewhat clear on the importance of why we need to educate our own children. And that includes, number one, Black children will never be the freedom fighters we need them to be. They will never be loyal to the community if they're not taught to be loyal. And no one's going to be loyal to a race that they have no respect for. And so our children have to be taught who they are and where they come from. In addition to that, our children are dealing with a plethora of ills that are targeting them for self-destruction. We have the transgender agenda. We have the rainbow militia. Okay, we have the black on black crime. We have the intensification of self-hatred. There's about 5 or 6 major campaigns aimed at conditioning Black youth to self-destruct. And the only way you overcome that is through education. And we have to educate them ourselves. The problem is slavery took from us a natural desire to want to control one's community and one's destiny. We're the only people who are nonchalant about controlling our space and time. We're the only people who are unconcerned and apathetic about the ability to use power, to build power, to develop power so we can protect ourselves and dictate our agenda upon other people. Black people are allergic to power. We are allergic to organization, and we are allergic to financially investing in our own liberation. And until we do those 3 things, we will never catch up in the global race for control and domination.
So, in my understanding, right, education is a form of, for lack of a better word, programming, right? So, if we don't program our children, right, to look out for themselves and to look out for the race, right? If we leave the education to our former slave masters, we're doing the same thing to our children that the slave master have done to us. Am I right?
That's very true. It's very true. You know, education is one of the most important institutions you can have in a community. And at the same time, we are allowed to build our own schools. So the only question, you know, becomes why haven't we done so? Why aren't we doing so on a mass scale, on a systemic level? And the answer is because we're unconcerned. We don't care. The truth of the matter is that African people in the Western Hemisphere in particular, we are not really concerned about the liberation of our children, the condition of our children, or the future of our community. Because if we did, there would be way more independent schools in the Western Hemisphere than what we have now. Black people are in survival consciousness. We are in survival consciousness. We are doggy paddling in the waters of white supremacy, and we are simply trying to exist. We're not trying to thrive, and that's the problem. Everyone is dealing in survival consciousness. We're not dealing in progressive consciousness. We only want to survive.
So the next question is, what brought this on, and how do we get from where we are to a better place?
Well, it
Wait,
began
before you go ahead, because we haven't always been like this, haven't we? Historically, I mean.
absolutely. We were not like this historically,
Right.
but we have been like this for about 400 years as a result of slavery, colonization. And I think that we have gotten comfortable being on the bottom. Once upon a time, we were not comfortable as second class citizens. And now we're not even second class citizens. We're probably third or fourth class citizens. And I think Black people have traded in honor and racial integrity for access to white society and for access to the trinkets and privileges of white society.
Mm.
Social media, cell phones, nice cars, nice clothing, nice homes, that has become the replacement for true freedom. And so many of our people are okay. They have bartered respect, they have bartered integrity, they have bartered freedom, justice, and equality for access to European capitalism. And you see it every day. I think there's no greater example than the Black middle class. The Black middle class has thoroughly exchanged freedom, justice, and equality for access to white capitalism and access to white materialism. They don't fight for anything, they don't organize. There's no real leadership from the Black middle class as it used to be 50 to 75 years ago. And of course, the working class and the underclass, they follow the behavior and example, unfortunately, of the middle class. And the Black middle class has no agenda for Black liberation. Their agenda is to copy white people, to imitate white people, and to be accepted by white people.
So you're saying that most of our leaders have sold out for being able to drive a better car and being able to live in a little nicer house than the poorer class of us. That's what you're saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
That right there is freedom for Black people. That's freedom for Black people. The ability to look like I am wealthy is what freedom is to Black people. We're not interested in the development of power. And one of the reasons we're not interested in the development of power is in order to develop power, that will require unity, because power is not in the individual, power is in the group. There
Of
is
course.
no power in the individual separate from the group, because no individual can withstand the onslaught of another group that is organized with power. So in order to have power, you got to get organized. Black people are not interested in organizing. And part of that stems from the fact that slavery and colonization and 21st century Jim Crow has beat the race pride out of the Negro. They have literally beat and stripped psychologically and emotionally the racial pride out of the Negro. And as a result of that, you know, we don't have a racial ego. We have religious ego. We have fraternal ego. We have uh, national egos. You know, we have egos for our gangs and sororities and fraternities. If you talk about my church, if you talk about my religion, I'm ready to fight. If you talk about my gang, you talk about my Masonic lodge, I'm ready to fight. But if you disrespect African people, I do not care. We no longer have a racial ego. Every other group has a racial ego. They're ready to fight, die and fight for who they are, not African people. We have no racial ego. Many of us wish we were not African to begin with.
You know what you just said? I've read this in Amos Wilson, Self Hatred, Self Defeat book, and he speaks about the ego in opposed to the racial ego. And he's saying exactly the same thing you say. And
Brother, brother
racial
Omar,
pride and self pride, he made the clear distinction between both. Go ahead, Coach Floyd.
brother Omar, good morning. This Coach Foy. Listen, you just hit the nail straight on the head. You put the wrong bullseye, we call it. Uh, what you just stated, I see it happening directly in the Virgin Islands. You call it out, you spell it out like it was written on the wall and you were just reading it off. The
Yes,
example of black people who want to just consider themselves rich and give up everything. And whatever you just said is the gospel truth. I'm sitting here, my hair stand up on my hand when you describe how these people behave, and it's so right. And I hope that more people will come out and listen to you on Saturday at the Agriculture Fairground. It begins at 3 p.m. I don't know what time you probably coming on. You probably coming on like 4 or 5 o'clock. I'm inviting the people to come out and listen because what you just said is the gospel truth. And I hope that your school could materialize and move big, and you could probably spread it, start that one school, go to other places and open another school, especially like in the Virgin Islands. Because as you said, some of us believe we shouldn't be black. And we look down on each other when all of us supposed to be educating and helping each other up.
Well, Dr. Omar, you have traveled many countries around the world. Would you say that African people have the same underlying issues as far as leadership is concerned?
Yes.
yes, I would.
Yes.
Absolutely, because white supremacy is global. And what it does to African people anywhere, it does to African people everywhere. And although there may be some nuances that vary from region to region, from space to space, from country to country, or continent to continent, overall, the system of white supremacy pretty much operates identically around the world, which is interesting because when I travel and speak to African people in the various continents, they often believe that their version of white supremacy is so much different than the other versions. It is amazing how we like to exaggerate differences. We are so tribalistic in our personality. In fact, I would say African people have a tribalistic personality disorder. We go out of our way to differentiate ourselves from other African people, even when we're talking about oppression. Wherever I go, African people tell me, you will never see racism like you see it here. You will never see internal division like you see it here. You will never see Western exploitation like you see it here. And I'm like, I've seen the same thing everywhere I've been. But we like to differentiate ourselves from one another, even in talking about racism. We go out of our way to make excuses not to organize and not to unite. And the funny thing about it is the white power structure, and even now the Chinese power structure, isn't concerned about Black people doing anything to change the agendas that they have for us, because everybody knows the greatest weakness of African people is internal organization. That is our global reputation. We are known for never coming together for our own best interests over a specified amount of time and sticking together to achieve a desired goal. And if we're required to use our own money to save ourselves, you can almost guarantee that nothing will take place. We might show up to the meeting, we might show up to the rally, we might vote, we might march, we might pray. But if you say stick together until the goal is achieved, and at the same time contribute your disposable wealth for the financing of liberation, you can almost guarantee that nobody's concerned about Black people doing that. We are not ready to sacrifice financially for our own liberation. And the world knows this.
So Dr. Umar, explain to us psychologically how does having a deity that does not look like you plays into your behavior as a human being?
Well, I would say that the European Christ image has probably been the greatest tool towards the psychological colonization of African people. Because as I travel the world, that is one of the constant relics of European culture that I find almost everywhere I go. Whether it's the Caribbean islands, throughout the continent of Africa, whether it's Europe, whether it's here in the States, the white image of God, you know, and the fact that Black people are still comfortable having it. See, that's the greater issue. Why are we still so comfortable having the white image of the Creator in our homes, in front of our children, at the church? If you are content with a white image of God, you are also content with a white oppressor. You cannot love God in white flesh and be opposed to a white oppressor in European flesh. So that symbol, that white Jesus, is a good indicator of the political consciousness that the person has who owns that picture. You know, it's like if you're looking for a wife, if you're dealing with a woman who's okay with a white image of Christ, that definitely cannot be the wife for you, the husband for you. Anybody comfortable with their enemy standing in and substituting for their deity is completely comfortable with white supremacy and domination. And let us be clear, the psychological domination of African people has been greater. It has been a greater Holocaust than any other aspect of our experience under white power. The psychological domination was worse than the physical. It was worse than the slavery. It's worse than the economic Holocaust, the cultural Holocaust, the intellectual Holocaust. Because when someone controls the thinking, they automatically control the feeling and they automatically control the behavior. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who was a colleague of the most honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, Dr. Woodson in Miseducation of the Negro, which was published while Mr. Garvey was in prison. In that book, Dr. Woodson says, when you control a man's mind, you don't have to worry about his thoughts, and you definitely don't have to worry about his actions. You don't have to tell him he's not welcomed. He will automatically remove himself from the table without being told. You don't have to send him to the back door. He will go to the back door on his own. And when he gets to the back, if there is no door, he will make a door to walk out of it, because such has been the conditioning of his mind. Marcus Garvey said, don't take the kinks out of your hair, take the kinks out of your mind. He said, if you free the minds of men, ultimately you free the bodies of men. And we are not even beginning to touch the surface of the liberation of African consciousness until we start educating Black children. Because as my ancestor Frederick Douglass said, it is better to raise strong children than it is to repair broken men.
The problem with us, we think everybody who show up ready to die. No, they not. No, they not. Find out what they willing to sacrifice, and that's where I put you. You can take the phone calls, but you can't be on the planning. You can cook the food, but you ain't gonna be one of the soldiers. You see that? You can work with the children, but you're not gonna be getting no military training.